The transport pod hissed open, releasing a puff of sterilized air into the equally sterile arrival bay. Ray Jenkins stepped out, inhaling the metallic tang that permeated Vienna's atmosphere processing systems. He shouldered his duffel bag and looked around at the geometric precision of the terminal, all sharp angles, seamless transitions, and not a single decorative element in sight. Welcome to Planet Efficient, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his permanently shoveled brown hair. A green-skinned official approached, tablet in hand, eye scanning Ray with mechanical efficiency. Engineer Raymond Jenkins of Earth Identification confirmed your punctuality is noted and appreciated. The official didn't extend a hand or even nod. Such gestures were considered wasteful on Verdiana. Just Ray is fine, he said, flashing a smile that the official didn't return. And thanks, I tried to be on time for interplanetary travel. Makes a better first impression than saying sorry, I'm late, my shuttle got eaten by a space whale. The official's expression didn't flicker. Humor without practical purpose is discouraged in public spaces. Your assigned quarters are in Residential Sector 7, Unit 42. Your work assignment begins at Planetary Cycle 1.3 tomorrow. Do you require nutritional sustenance? Ray fought the urge to roll his eyes. I'm good, thanks. Had some nutritional sustenance on the shuttle. Very well. Follow illuminated pathway 17 to your accommodations. Ray trudged down the indicated path, passing dozens of green-skinned Vide hands going about their business with synchronized precision. Nobody was chatting, nobody was laughing, nobody was even looking around. They moved with purpose and nothing else. Like components in an enormous machine, his quarters turned out to be minimalist: box, a bed, a workstation, storage compartments, and a sanitation unit. Ray tossed his bag onto the bed and pulled out a crumpled NASA t-shirt, shaking it out before hanging it prominently in the storage unit. At least it added a splash of color to the monochromatic space. Home sweet sterile box. Heat SAD. The central energy facility of Vienna's capital city loomed like a massive crystalline structure. Power conduits and energy pathways visible through transparent sections of its walls. Ray whistled as he made his way through the security checkpoints, earning disapproving glances from the facility staff. His supervisor, a tall Verdiana named Thorx, met him at the primary control hub. Engineer Jenkins, your punctuality is appreciated. Second time I've heard it since I landed, Ray replied. You guys must really have a thing for watches. Thor's face remained impassive. Time efficiency is fundamental to Vidian. In progress. Your assignment is to upgrade the quantum fluctuation stabilizers in Sector 12. Tools have been prepared according to Earth standard specifications. Sweet. Point me to the coffee station first, and I'll get right on it. Thorx tilted his head slightly. There is no coffee station. Stimulants are distributed only at designated nutrition intervals. You're kidding, right? Ray groaned. How does anyone function without coffee breaks? We function with optimal efficiency because we are not constantly interrupting our work for unnecessary consumption. Ray shook his head. All right. Sector 12. It is 3 hours into his shift. Ray sat cross-legged on the floor of a maintenance junction, singing Rocket Man under his breath while recalibrating a particularly stubborn power regulator. Come on, baby, don't fight me on this, he said to the machine, tapping its casing affectionately. We both know you'll feel better after the upgrade. Why are you speaking to the equipment? Ray jumped, nearly dropping his calibration tool. A female Verdian stood watching him with an expression that wasn't quite the blank mask he'd seen on everyone else. She wore the distinctive emerald-trimmed uniform of a high-ranking official, and intricate jade markings track patterns across her shoulders and upper neck. He scrambled to his feet. Just a little Earth tradition. We talk to machines sometimes helps with the troubleshooting. How can verbal communication is assist with nonsensy and technology? She asked, head tilted slightly. Ray shrugged. Honestly, no idea. But when you call a stubborn engine a worthless piece of junk, it usually starts working again out of spite. Her brow-furrowed. Machines cannot experience spite. That's exactly what they want you to think. Ray grinned, then caught himself. Sorry, more useless Earth humor. I'm Ray Jenkins, Energy Systems Specialist. I am Larry Daw of High Counselor Sox. She studied him with startling emerald eyes. "I am conducting facility inspections as part of my diplomatic training," Ray noticed. Despite his efforts not to, that lay was stunning by any planet standards. Athletic build, perfect posture, and features that somehow managed to be both striking and delicate. He quickly averted his gaze, remembering the briefing about Vian and attitudes toward physical appreciation. "Well, don't let me keep you from your inspection race," said, turning back to the regulator, "though fair warning, I've made unauthorized modifications to this junction." "Unauthorized modifications are prohibited," Larry stated, moving closer. "What have you done?" "I added efficiency parameters that weren't in the specs," Ray explained, pointing to the regulator's display. "See those numbers? Your system was wasting about 3% energy through heat dispersion." "I tweaked the superconductor alignment to recapture it." Loride leaned in, studying the readings with surprise. "Rising intensity. This is not standard procedure." "Standard procedure isn't always the most efficient," Ray said, surprised to find himself using Viad and logic. "Earth engineers are taught to improvise. Improvisation introduces variables and potential failure points," Larry countered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Sometimes those variables lead to breakthroughs," Rai resumed, his work reattaching the regulator's casing. "Think of it as controlled evolution instead of chaotic improvisation." To his surprise, lay crouched beside him, watching his hands work. "Your methodology is unusual, yet your results exceed expected parameters. That's basically my entire performance review history in one sentence." Ray laughed before Lorai could respond. A loud crack echoed through the junction, followed by a surge of blue electricity across the conduit above them. A power coupling had ruptured, shooting a deadly arc of energy directly toward where Lorai knelt. Ray didn't think. He moved, his arm shot out, grabbing Larry and yanking her backward as the energy discharge scorched the floor where she'd been just milliseconds before they tumbled backward together, Ray's arms still wrapped around her shoulders as the rogue electricity dissipated into the emergency grounding system. Alarm klaxons wailed. Emergency containment fields snapped into place around the damaged coupling. "Are you okay?" Ray asked, smiling with relief. As he helped Larray to her feet, she stared at his hand on her arm, then at his face, her expression unreadable. "That manner of physical contact is highly inappropriate," she said stiffly, though something in her eyes suggested curiosity rather than offense. "And your facial expression is unnecessarily expressive on Earth. We call it a smile," Rai said, releasing her arm, but maintaining eye contact. "You should try it sometime." "Smiling without purpose is considered, let me guess, inefficient." "Precisely." But Lay's posture had changed subtly. Her voice softened. "However, your rapid response likely prevented serious injury. This raises questions about the value of spontaneous physical action in emergency scenarios." "That's a very technical way of saying thanks for saving me," Rai replied. "Gratitude is implied in the acknowledgement of beneficial actions," Larai stated, but then, almost imperceptibly, the corner of her mouth twitched. "But yes, as you would say on Earth." "Thank you." Security personnel flooded the junction, followed by repair crews and administrators demanding reports. Ray and Lay were separated, each questioned extensively about the malfunction. By the time Ray finished his incident report, Lorai was gone. Over the next week, Ray noticed Lorai appearing with increasingly transparent excuses to observe his work. First it was routine inspection follow-ups, then integration protocol verification. By the 5th day, she wasn't even bothering with pretexts anymore. "Your methodology for power grid synchronization is unorthodox," she commended, watching him bypass an unnecessary safety redundancy. "That's a nice way of saying I'm breaking all your rules," Ray replied, not looking up from his work. "If it helps, we have rules on Earth too. I break those as well, yet your results consistently exceed efficiency projections." Lorray noted, "This creates a logical inconsistency in our operational doctrine." "Maybe your doctrine needs updating," Ray suggested, finishing the bypass. The power readings immediately stabilized, showing a 4.2% increase in throughputs. "Sometimes the rulebook needs a rewrite." L's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "That assertion would be considered borderline seditious in certain contexts." "Good thing we're just talking about power grids." Then Ray winked. Later that same day, Ray found himself whistling While reconfiguring a junction box, to his surprise, he heard Rai behind him. Attempting to mimic the tune badly, he turned to find her standing there, looking almost embarrassed. The vibration pattern you produce seems to correlate with increased work efficiency, she explained quickly. I was attempting to reproduce the effect it's called. Whistling, Ray said, and it doesn't make me more efficient, it just makes boring work less boring. Boredom is a productivity impediment, Rai reasoned, therefore eliminating boredom increases productivity. Ray laughed. That's some Olympic-level mental gymnastics. To justify trying something fun. Fun is not the objective, Ray insisted, though her eyes betrayed her optimization. Is the objective? Sure it is, Ray noted, playing along just like I talk to machines for troubleshooting purposes, and not because it amuses me. The next day, Ray caught Rai whispering to a diagnostic terminal. When she thought no one was watching 2 weeks into his assignment, Ray was making his usual unauthorized coffee substitute in a maintenance closet he converted into an improvised break room. He'd rigged a heating element to warm reconstituted earth coffee powder he'd smuggled in his personal effects. The resulting brew was terrible, but it was better than nothing. The door slid open, and Ray froze, cup in hand, expecting Thorks or another supervisor. Instead, Larry stood there looking uncharacteristically hesitant. This is clearly an unauthorized utilization of maintenance resources, she stated. Busted, Ray. In my defense, I'm 62% more productive with caffeine. I have not reported this violation, Larry said, stepping inside and letting the door close behind her. Nor do I intend to. Rai raised an eyebrow. Withholding information from authorities, that doesn't seem very wide of you. I find myself increasingly conflicted regarding certain regulatory standards. Elle admitted your presence has introduced inconsistencies in my established thought patterns. I tend to have that effect on people, Ray grinned, offering her the cup. Want to try it? Fair war morning. It's terrible. Lay eyed the cup suspiciously. Consuming non-approved substances is, let me guess, inefficient and potentially hazardous. Correct. It's just coffee, Larry. Humans have been drinking it for centuries. We're still around. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the cup and took a cautious sip, her face contorted in what Ray could only describe as confused disgust. This is extraordinary bitter, she managed, handing the cup back. Yeah, good. Coffee didn't make it into the diplomatic exchange program budget, Ray laughed, but it's still better than no coffee. The concept of consuming an unpleasant substance for its secondary effects is peculiar, Rai said, yet I find myself curious about other Earth customs that might appear equally inefficient at first assessment. Ray studied her face, realizing what she was awkwardly trying to say. Rai, are you asking me to show you how Earth people do things? I believe a comparative cultural study would be educationally valuable, she said formally, then added with startling directness, your behaviors are inefficiently fascinating. Ray Jenkins, would you be willing to provide a private educational demonstration of Earth customs for diplomatic purposes? Of course. Ray nearly choked on his coffee. Coming from a Vidian, especially one of Lay's status, this request bordered on scandalous, yet her eyes held genuine curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. I'd be happy to launch a cultural exchange program, Ray replied with a slow smile. For diplomatic purposes, naturally. Excellent, Ray said with the faintest hint of what might almost be called excitement in her voice. Shall we begin tomorrow? After standard operational hours, my quarters in the diplomatic residential sector would provide appropriate privacy for such educational activities. Ray couldn't help but laugh at her phrasing, which on Earth would have sounded decidedly suggestive. It's a date, he said, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, it's an appointment, a diplomatic appointment. I shall prepare accordingly. Larry nodded, turning to leave. At the door she paused, and Ray smiled. It is not entirely inefficient. It appears to serve some function I have yet to fully comprehend. With that enigmatic statement, she was gone, leaving Ray staring after her, wondering exactly what he'd gotten himself into. Ray spent the entire next day oscillating between anticipation and panic. What exactly did cultural education entail when the student was a high-ranking alien from a pleasure-phobic society? He'd already violated at least 12 Vidian protocols just by inviting her to his quarters. If anyone discovered their planned meeting, "You're overthinking this, Jenkins," he muttered to himself while reconfiguring power relays. "It's just cultural exchange." Totally legitimate, completely professional. By shift's end, Ray had transformed his sterile quarters into something resembling a human habitat. He'd unpacked all his Earth contraband. String lights that now draped across the ceiling, vintage band posters, Arctic Monkeys, Radiohead, and his guilty pleasure Taylor Swift's 50th anniversary tour, a small sound system, and various knickknacks that made the space distinctly unvidian. When his door chimed precisely at the agreed time, Ray's heart raced like he was 16 again. Waiting for his prom date, Lori stood in the corridor, glancing nervously over her shoulder before entering. She wore standard Vidian attire, a minimalist tunic in subdued green, but had removed the formal insignias of her rank. "I have informed my security detail that I am conducting independent research at the Central Archives," she explained. "We have approximately 3 standard hours before my absence becomes questionable. 3 hours to introduce you to fun." Ray nodded. "Challenge accepted." Lori surveyed the transform room, her emerald eyes widening. "Your living space is chaotic. Welcome to Earth Embassy." Unofficial, Ray announced, gesturing grandly to his humble room, "where fun isn't just allowed, it's encouraged." Lori approached a poster, studying it with scientific intensity. "These humans are holding primitive amplification devices, and their facial expressions suggest either intense pain or significant emotional distress. That's Arctic Monkeys in concert." Ray laughed. "And those expressions mean they're really into the music they're playing." Music, Larry repeated the word as if testing its weight. "Viridiana has sonic alignment tones for work productivity. But I understand Earth music serves no practical function." "That's where you're wrong," Wright said, activating his sound system. "Music's function is to make you feel something." Ray started with classical Diz Cla. Delon filled the room with gentle piano notes. Larry stood motionless, her eyes gradually softening as the melody progressed. "The mathematical precision is acceptable," she conceded. "There appears to be a logical progression to the tonal variations." Ray switched to jazz next. Miles Davis's "So What." The walking bass line and loose structure clearly puzzled Lay, but halfway through the track, Ray noticed her right foot tapping slightly in rhythm. She followed his gaze downward and froze, staring at her foot with alarm. "This rhythmic pattern is causing my body to respond without authorization," she said, looking genuinely disturbed. Ray fought back a grin. "That's called feeling the beat. Completely harmless except to your dignity. If you have no rhythm, is this a typical human physiological response?" Larry asked cautiously, allowing her foot to resume its tapping. "Absolutely. Wait till you see this." Ray stood and began dancing. "Nothing complicated, just moving with the rhythm." Elle's eyes widened in horror. "Are you experiencing a seizure? Should I summon medical assistance?" "This is dancing," Ray explained, continuing to move. "It's how humans express enjoyment of music physically on Viridiana. Such movements would be interpreted as either a mating display or signs of severe neurological distress," she explained. "Seriously, on Earth, it's Saturday night at any club," Ray countered, extending his hand. "Want to try?" Ray stared at his outstretched hand. "Physical coordination for non-productive purposes," she began, then surprised him by taking his hand. "An interesting anthropological experiment." Ray guided her through basic movements, trying to ignore how her touch sent electricity through his fingers that had nothing to do with the facility's power systems. At first, Ray moved with robotic precision, copying his movements. "Exactly. You're thinking too much," Ray said. "Dancing isn't about perfect execution, it's about feeling." "Feeling is inefficient," Ray responded automatically, but her movements gradually became less mechanical. "That's it," Ray encouraged. "Sometimes inefficiency is the whole point." After several songs, Ray showed how to high-five the first time their palms connected. Ray jerked back as if shocked. "That was unusual," she said, staring at her hand. A sensory response occurred that was not unpleasant. "Just wait." Ray grinned. "The night of human inefficiency is just getting started." Next came card games. Ray taught her poker, which Ray mastered in minutes, calculating probabilities with frightening precision, while insisting she was merely engaging in statistical Analysis exercises, when Rai demonstrated simple magic tricks making a coin disappear and reappear. Behind her ear, Rai launched into a detailed scientific deconstruction of sleight of hand principles until Rai placed a finger gently against her lips. Sometimes the magic is in not knowing how it works, he said softly, withdrawing his finger when he realized how intimate the gesture was. Rai fell silent, staring at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. I have a confession, she finally said. Before meeting you, I had accessed restricted Earth cultural files. I was curious. You're a rebel underneath all that Vidian efficiency, aren't you? Ray smirked. Perhaps, she admitted. My position grants me access to historical archives most citizens never see. Did you know Viridiana wasn't always this way? 3 centuries ago, before the great rationalization, our society celebrated collective experiences that appear similar to your fun. What happened? Rai asked. Resource scarcity led to the efficiency revolution. Emotional expression was deemed wasteful. Personal pleasure was categorized as selfish. Resource allocation. Lay's voice carried a hint of sadness. Within 2 generations, our ancient celebrations were forgotten. Rai considered this. That's pretty heavy stuff. I think we need to lighten the mood. He moved to a small device in the corner that he kept covered. What is that apparatus? Ray asked, scientific curiosity returning. This, Ray said with theatrical flair, revealing a compact freezer unit, is humanity's greatest achievement. He produced 2 bowls and scooped what appeared to be white frozen substance into each. What is the purpose of this frozen substance? Lee asked suspiciously. Just taste it, Ray encouraged, handing her a spoon. Liar studied the ice cream like it might be radioactive, then took a minuscule amount on her spoon and cautiously placed it in her mouth. The transformation was immediate and electric. Her eyes widened to their fullest extent. Her green skin flushed a deeper emerald hue, and then a sound escaped her that was something between a gasp and a moan, so primal and unrestrained that both of them froze in sudden awkward recognition of its intensity. That was she stammered uncharacteristically, long lost for words. Just wait till you try chocolate, Ray said with a wink, his collar suddenly feeling too tight. Rai stared at the bowl, then took another spoonful, this time closing her eyes as she consumed it. The sensory experience is overwhelming, she whispered. How is this not standard practice throughout the galaxy? Some pleasures are worth traveling across space for, Rai replied, watching her enjoy each bite with growing fascination. Over the next 2 weeks, their cultural research sessions became frequent and increasingly daring. Each night, Larry requested new Earth experiences. They watched comedy holovids that made her cover her mouth to suppress unauthorized laughter. They built a fort out of blankets, a completely impractical defensive structure, she noted while clearly enjoying herself. They played Earth music loudly and danced with growing abandon. Ray taught her to high-five, fist bump, and eventually to hug. The first embrace lasted perhaps 2 seconds before Rai pulled away. Her skin flushed. That deeper emerald physical contact, for non-medical or non-reproductive purposes, is strictly forbidden, she whispered. Yet the neurological response is remarkable. Humans are tactile creatures, Ray explained. We need physical contact for emotional health. Perhaps Vidians once did as well, Larry mused during one session while explaining Earth social customs. Ray demonstrated a casual shoulder massage. The moment his fingers pressed into her tense muscles, Larry made a sound that nearly stopped his heart, her body arching with such force. She knocked over a nearby chair. She spun around, eyes wide. Is this what Earth humans do regularly? She asked breathlessly. For recreation. This is just the G-rated stuff, Ray joked, not realizing she wouldn't understand the reference. G-rated, she questioned. Never mind, Ray backpedaled. I just meant humans have lots of ways of experiencing physical pleasure that aren't about reproduction. Fascinating, Larry murmured, her eyes never leaving his. Our historical archives suggest similar practices existed on Verdiana before being classified as dangerously inefficient. Their meetings expanded beyond Ray's quarters. Using her security clearance, Rai brought Rai to abandoned sections of the city where they could explore without surveillance. In one such area, she showed him ancient Murals depicting Vidians dancing, embracing, and celebrating in ways now forbidden. My research suggests a correlation between the suppression of sensory pleasure and declining innovation rates. Lei explain tracing the faded images creativity requires. Inefficiency, the exploration of unlikely possibilities. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, Ray teased, though he had more than she could know. As weeks passed, Ray noticed Lei changing subtly. Her movements became more fluid, less mechanical. She occasionally used Earth idioms. Once he even caught her humming a Beatles song he played. More alarming rumors circulated about the High Counselor's daughter acting irregularly. Thorks warned Rai that his Earth mannerisms were excessively influential and reminded him that cultural contamination was a serious offense. Ri knew they should stop. The risk grew daily. He had every moment with Lorei felt more valuable than his own safety. The tipping point came during their 19th session. Ray had introduced Lorei to Earth dance music, specifically disco, which she found rhythmically optimal. They spun around his quarters laughing as Ray taught her the hustle. Your civilization rejected this art form? Larry asked incredulously. Executing a perfect spin. The 70s were complicated. Ray laughed. They were dancing closer now, Ray guiding her through more partner-focused moves. The proximity was intoxicating. Her scent reminded him of something like cinnamon and ozone, distinctly alien, yet increasingly familiar. Suddenly, Lorei stopped dancing. Ray, she said with uncharacteristic directness, in my research of Earth customs, I encountered a practice I found particularly interesting. What's that? Ray asked, still holding her hand from their dance. A gesture called kissing, she said quietly. Is it true humans press their mouths together as a sign of affection? Ray swallowed hard. That's accurate. The files classified it as a primitive biological bonding mechanism. Lorei continued, stepping closer, but I suspect there's more to it. There definitely is. Ray managed, acutely aware of how close she stood. I would like to experience this custom, Leroy said, her scientific tone bellied by the intensity in her eyes for comparative cultural understanding. Before Rai could formulate a proper response, something about protocol violations and cultural boundaries and all the reasons this was a spectacularly bad idea. Lorei leaned forward awkwardly, her lips meeting his in a clumsy but earnest first kiss. Time suspended. The universe contracted to the single point where their lips connected. Ray had kissed women before, but nothing like this. A kiss across species, across worldviews, across everything that should have kept them apart. Lorei pulled back slightly, eyes questioning. Was that correctly executed? My research materials were limited. Ray laughed softly. It was perfect, he whispered, leaning in to show her a slightly different approach. Their second kiss deepened. Lei, learning with her typical rapid precision. Ray's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as her fingers tentatively explored his hair. The searing blast of the door disintegrating interrupted them like a bucket of ice water. They sprang apart as 6 security officers, armed in weapons, trained on Ray behind them. A tall, imposing Vidian in formal council robes stepped through the smoldering doorway. Father Lorei, gasped High Counselor Zavo, surveyed the room with cold disgust. The Earth decorations, the music still playing, the remains of some food on the table, and most damning, his daughter standing breathless and disheveled beside the human. Restrain the Earth contaminant socks, ordered his voice glacial. 2 officers seized Ray, forcing his arms behind his back and securing them with energy binders that bit into his wrists. This is a misunderstanding, Ray began, but a sharp blow to his stomach silenced him. Citizen Raymond Jenkins, the security chief, announced, formally, you are charged with cultural contamination, sensory corruption, and moral degradation of a counselor's daughter. The penalty is exile or worse. Father, this is my responsibility. Lorei stepped forward. I initiated the cultural exchange. Silence. Zavo thundered, you have been compromised by Earth depravity. Medical purification will be arranged immediately. Medical purification. Ray struggled against his restraints. What the hell does that mean? Zaba didn't deign to look at him. Remove the human to detention, full isolation protocols. The trial will commence at next cycle. As they dragged Ray from the room, he caught one last glimpse of Lee, her face a mask of horror as two medical officers approached her with what looked disturbingly like neural equipment. Rai. He shouted, "Whatever they do, remember, feeling isn't wrong." The last thing he saw before a stun baton sent him into unconsciousness was her emerald eyes filled with something that looked revolutionary on a Vidian face, raw, unfiltered emotion. Ray woke in a detention cell that made his quarters look positively extravagant. The space contained nothing but a hard sleeping platform in a sanitation unit. The walls glowed with a faint antibacterial blue light that made his eyes ache. No windows, no sounds, perfect isolation. His head throbbed where the stun baton had connected. Ray sat up, wincing as his muscles protested. How long had he been unconscious? Hours, days. The perfect timelessness of the cell offered no clues. "You've really done it this time, Jenkins," he muttered, testing his limbs. Nothing broken. At least his thoughts raced to Larry. What was medical purification? It sounded ominously like brainwashing. Had they already erased her memories of their time together? The thought carved a hollow space in his chest that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. The cell door slid open with a clinical hiss. Two guards entered, their faces impassive beneath their helmets. "Prisoner Jenkins, rise and comply," the taller one ordered. "Good morning to you too," Ray replied, struggling to his feet. "Any chance of breakfast before my execution? Nutritional requirements have been met via atmospheric supplementation." The guard responded humorlessly. "The tribunal awaits." They secured his hands with energy restraints and marched him through a series of identical white corridors. Ray tried to track their path, but the deliberately disorienting layout made it impossible. Finally, they arrived at a massive set of doors that slid silently apart. The tribunal chamber was a perfect hemisphere with 7 elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. Light filtered from above, harsh and unforgiving. An observation gallery circled the perimeter, filled with Viad Onin, whose expressions ranged from clinical interest to undisguised disgust. Ray was positioned in the center on a small platform that rose slightly from the floor, a stage for the accused. 6 of the 7 council seats were already occupied. The 7th, the central position, remained empty until a side door opened and High Counselor HFY entered. He took his seat without acknowledging Ray's existence. "This tribunal is now in session," announced a disembodied voice. "The accused, Raymond Jenkins' birth, faces charges of cultural contamination, sensory corruption, and moral degradation of a citizen of prominent stocks." Finally looked at Ray, his gaze cold and analytical. "These are serious charges, Earthman. The maximum penalty is a neural reconfiguration followed by permanent exile. Do you comprehend the gravity of your position?" "Neural reconfiguration." Ray couldn't hide his horror. "You mean brain damage?" "We mean correction," another counselor clarified. "Removal of destructive tendencies that threaten our social harmony." Ray swallowed hard. "Where's Larai? What have you done to her?" "Citizen Lay is undergoing corrective therapies," Zoc stated flatly. "Her temporary aberration are being addressed." The word temporary ignited a flash of hope in Ray. Maybe they hadn't completed whatever process they planned for her. "The evidence against you was comprehensive," continued the tribunal moderator, as holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing recordings of Ray and Elle's cultural education sessions, dancing, laughing, sharing food, and finally the kiss that had triggered the raid. Several counselors visibly recoiled at the intimate footage. "Do you deny these actions?" Zoc demanded. Ray straightened his shoulders. "No, I don't deny them, but I reject the premise that they constitute crimes." "Explain," demanded one of the female counselors, leaning forward with surprising interest. "Look," Ray began, "I understand Verdiana values efficiency, but true efficiency isn't about eliminating pleasure. It's about harnessing it. Humans didn't become the spacefaring civilization. We are by being joyless automatons. We innovate because we feel, we explore because we wonder, we connect because we care." "Primitive emotional reasoning," dismissed another counselor. "Veridiana achieved technological superiority through disciplined focus, not self-indulgent pleasure-seeking." "Did you?" Ray challenged. "Because from what Lai showed me, your ancient civilization was both joyful and advanced. The great rationalization didn't make you more efficient, it just made you less human." "We are not human, Zoc," Snapped, and your human values have no place in our commotion at the main entrance. Into interrupted him, the massive doors slid apart, and gas rippled through the observation gallery. Lorei strode into the chamber, but not as the proper restrained diplomat's daughter. Everyone knew her traditional tunic had been replaced with an outfit that caused several observers to actually shield their eyes. A vibrant blue dress, with patterns reminiscent of Earth fashion. Her normally regulation-perfect hair was arranged in loose waves. Most shocking of all, she carried a bowl that immediately recognized. "Sorry, I'm late," she announced, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "I was preparing evidence." Citizen Lazevo rose from his seat, his composure slipping for the first time. "You were not summoned to these proceedings. Return to medical rehabilitation immediately." "I decline further treatment," Larry replied, calmly moving to stand beside Ari. "As is my right under Statute 42 bits of the Vidian Health Code, no citizen of adult stat can be compelled to undergo neurological treatment without proving decisional impairment. Your behavior demonstrates clear impairment." Seox thunder. "Does it?" Lorei challenged. "Or does it demonstrate that I've discovered something our society forgot generations ago?" She turned to address the entire council in the observation gallery. "If experiencing joy is a crime on Vide," she announced, her voice strong and clear, "then every citizen should be imprisoned." Before anyone could respond, Lorei lifted a spoonful of ice cream from her bowl and consumed it slowly and deliberately. She closed her eyes, her face registering unmistakable pleasure. Several gasps echoed through the chamber. "What are you doing?" Silox demanded, his voice horror with shock. "Presenting evidence," Larry replied. She activated a small device on her wrist, and holographic images appeared throughout the chamber. Ancient Vidian art showing celebration, dancing, embraces, and communal meals. "Our ancestors understood what we've forgotten." L continued, advancing through the images. "Pleasure isn't inefficient. Denying our nature is what wastes energy. These historical artifacts are restricted," protested one of the counselors. "Yes," Larry agreed, "because they contradict the narrative that Vidian prosperity depends on emotional suppression, but the data doesn't support that claim." She activated another display, showing comparative innovation rates in the 3 centuries since the Great Rationalization. Technological innovation has decreased by 47%. Scientific breakthroughs have fallen by 62%. Our society isn't more efficient, it's stagnating. This is sedition, Sox declared, though Ree noticed uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "This is truth," Lay countered. She turned to guards at the side of the chamber and nodded. They wheeled in a cart bearing small bowls, identical to the one she held. "I brought samples for each council member," Ray announced. "Before you judge Ray for introducing me to this experience, I invite you to experience it yourselves." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The counselors exchanged uncomfortable glances. "This is highly irregular," the tribunal moderator stammered. "So is putting someone on trial for sharing ice cream," Ray interjected, gaining courage from Lay's presence. The youngest council member, a female who Ray estimated to be the Vidian equivalent of 30 Earth years, was the first to reach for a bowl. Her colleagues gasped. "Counselor Nera, this is inappropriate." Sox warned, "It's evidence evaluation," she replied coolly, lifting a small spoonful to her mouth. The chamber fell silent as she tasted the ice cream. Her eyes widened, and a small involuntary "oh" escaped her lips. "This is," she began, staring at the bowl in wonder. "Inefficient, wasteful," Larai suggested. "Extraordinary." Counselor Neref finished taking another spoonful. One by one, the other counselors followed suit, some hesitantly, others with barely concealed curiosity. Each reaction was similar: surprise, then pleasure, then an almost childlike fascination. Only Sox remained resolute, refusing to touch his bowl. "This changes nothing legally," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction as he watched his fellow counselors experiencing obvious enjoyment. Father L said gently, approaching his seat with her own bowl. "Ray didn't corrupt me. He reminded me of something our people have forgotten, and he did it not for political gain or power, but simply because he wanted to share something beautiful. Our way of life," Zvox began, "our way of life is based on a false premise," Larai interrupted, "that feeling and efficiency are incompatible. But look at Earth. They've achieved interstellar travel, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. While still dancing, laughing, and yes, eating ice cream, she offered her bowl to her father. Just try it not as the high counselor as my father, who once carried me on his shoulders and taught me to count the stars. The chamber held its collective breath slowly with the reluctance of a man stepping off a cliff. Socks took the offered spoon. He examined the white substance carefully, then tasted it. His face remained impassive for 3 long seconds before a subtle change occurred. A slight softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation of his rigid posture. This is acceptable, he conceded, which Ray suspected was the Vidian equivalent of mind-blowingly delicious. The tribunal will recess for deliberation, the moderator announced as the council members filed out. Ray turned to Lay. That was amazing, but how did you escape the medical purification? I didn't, Elle admitted quietly. They initiated the first phase, a neural relaxant designed to make me compliant. But it had an unintended side effect. What side effect? Lay's lips curved into what was undeniably a smile. It temporarily suppressed my inhibition, center the part of the brain where Vidian socialization is strongest. Instead of becoming sent, I became decisive. So you're drugged right now? Rai asked, alarmed. The effects are already fading, she assured him, but they lasted long enough for me to access the historical archives, prepare this demonstration, and apparently develop an alarming tendency toward theatrical entrances. Rai laughed. Despite the gravity of their situation, I've created a monster. You've created nothing, Larag corrected him. You simply reminded me of what was already there. After an hour of deliberation that felt like days, the council returned. Ari tried to read their expressions, but Vidian faces were still frustratingly neutral, though he noticed Counselor Nera discreetly licking her lips. Cox took his central position. This tribunal has reached a decision, he announced. The charges against Raymond Jenkins cannot be dismissed as his actions clearly violated established protocols. Ray's heart sank. Exile, then, or worse. However, Zavo continued, the council acknowledges that these protocols may require re-evaluation in light of historical and empirical evidence presented today. Murmurs rippled through the observation gallery. Therefore, we propose a compromise. Raymond Jenkins will not be punished, but will instead serve as Viana's first official cultural exchange ambassador, tasked with introducing selected Earth customs in a controlled, responsible manner under council supervision. Ray blinked in disbelief. You want me to officially teach Vidians how to have fun? We want you to participate in a limited cultural integration experiment, Socks corrected. Though Ray could have sworn he saw the ghost of amusement in the counselor's eyes with inappropriate